Lyon, Executive Director of Voices for Life, our guest on this Testimony Tuesday, where we bring you real, live, first-hand testimonial accounts of the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. Today on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of St. Joseph. I'm Jim Havens. Again, our guest today, Melanie Lyon, Executive Director of Voices for Life. Voices for Life is a pro-life nonprofit that exists to fight abortion on the front lines in Indiana. VoicesForLife.com, VoicesForLife.com. Melanie Lyon, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
Hi, Jim. I'm doing really well.
Awesome. Well, great to have you with us. We always begin at the beginning on a Testimony Tuesday. So let's start with childhood. What was your early life like, your family, the culture that you grew up in?
I am the oldest of 10 children, so my culture was very busy and very loud. We grew up in South Bend, Indiana. My mom was a teacher, but she left her job after she had me and homeschooled all 10 of us kids. So we spent a lot of time together growing up. One thing I really appreciate about my parents is that they really, from a young age, kind of naturalized pro-life activism with all of us kids. So we would go to the local March for Life, the Life Chain. We would volunteer at Pro-Life Fair booths. And that sort of activity was like as normal as celebrating Christmas or Easter or celebrating a birthday. And so it really, from a very young age, instilled in me a heart for activism and for service. My mom would take, even when she was pregnant with me, she would go and pray at Ulrich Klopfer's abortion facility, which I don't know if your viewers would recognize that name, but he's an abortionist who is pretty infamous. He made headlines nationwide a few years ago after he died because police discovered over 2,000 fetal remains that had been hoarded in his garage. And he has a very tragic story of, he grew up in Dresden, and he would tell sidewalk counselors that were out and prayer warriors that were out at his facility that the reason he performed abortions was to get back at the U.S. for what the Allies had done to his Germany. But my mom would take me to pray at his South Bend location when she was pregnant with me, and then when I grew older. And I was young. I remember actually misbehaving and my mom yelling at us while we were at the facility. But one of the times that we were there, I remember a woman coming into the clinic with her daughter, and they kept going in and out, in and out, in and out of the facility, which I've spent a significant amount of time now at abortion facilities, and anyone who has knows that it's a sign that the woman does not want to have the abortion. And it was pretty clear from their body language that the mother was pressuring her daughter into having the procedure. And I remember my aunt and my mom like holding me and my cousin up so that this mom could see children and hopefully be like touched by the beauty of having children. But they did go into the facility. They were in there for the amount of time that indicated that they had the procedure, and we watched them come out. And I was really young, but it's something I've never forgotten. And I think it's one of the reasons that I've held my pro-life convictions my whole life, because one of the most prevalent lies that the pro-abortion industry pushes is that abortion is healthcare, abortion is women's empowerment. But from that very young age, I'd been to an abortion facility. It was a filthy abortion facility, as the discovery of after Klopfer's death is any indication. But it was very clear to me that abortion was not empowerment, and the women that were there were not there because they were empowered. In a lot of cases, it was because of coercion. So I'm very, very grateful to my parents for instilling that sense of pro-life activism in me from a young age. When I got into high school, I started feeling a really deep calling to do something to end abortion. Every time, I was still going to like events a couple times a year and volunteering a couple times a year. But every time I would attend a pro-life event or I would listen to a talk, the David Daleiden case was breaking while I was in college. And so I remember listening to those discoveries of Planned Parenthood trafficking fetal remains. I remember crying in my car, listening to just the horrific things that they found. But every time I would listen to something like that, I would feel this disturbance in my spirit, like, I really feel like I need to be doing more to end abortion. And so when I graduated from college and a position opened up at the local Right to Life group, I applied right away, and I got the job pretty much right away. And there's really, like, my work is really, really difficult, but there is a significant amount of peace in knowing that you're doing everything that God has asked you to do. Not that I'm a sinner, I fall all the time, but in my work, at least, I have been faithful, and there is a significant amount of peace that keeps me through even the really, really dark days.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Melanie Lyon is with us. Yeah. There's so much that you're sharing that I can certainly relate to. I'm sure others can as well. But yeah, I mean, it is a time that we are living in, this ongoing daily mass murder of our littlest brothers and sisters, that it ought to be normal to be standing up and doing and be active in pro-life and trying to do what we can to help push towards the end of this horrible evil. And at the same time, sadly, it isn't that normal that one's parents would really raise you up, being on the front lines in ways from your very beginning. But that ought to be normal. What is it about your parents, do you think, that gave them that awareness, that understanding to be able to see that as a normal thing and normalizing that within your family?
Well, they both obviously really love life because they had 10 children. So I think that that's definitely a part of it. With my mom, definitely, her parents, it's kind of a similar with me, as her parents raised her to that sort of activism was normal and to participate in that at least a couple times a year. My mom is a very devout Catholic, and that definitely informed how she raised us to value human life. My dad as well, he really loves especially little children. And he's not someone who gets into deep into theology or anything like that. He's kind of more of a simple person, but he can definitely see that it's wrong to kill a baby, and that my mom was definitely, in terms of going to daily mass outside of Sunday mass, my mom was definitely the one that would take us to do those sorts of things. But when we would go to the Life Chain once a year, my dad would be there, and it was a big deal for him to do something like that. And I think the fact that even he, who maybe wasn't as devout of a Catholic as my mom, prioritized this issue, it really informed me and the rest of my siblings that this ending abortion is a priority for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Melanie Lyon is with us, voicesforlife.com. We're going to get into more specifically what Voices for Life does and the good work that Melanie does as we get later into the program. But we always like to follow the graces here. So I'm guessing you were baptized as an infant, first Holy Communion around second grade or so, confirmation maybe sometime in high school. What about the sacramental life? What role did that play in your life as a young person? Did you have a pretty strong grasp of the importance of this, or was that something you kind of learned as you went? What was your experience?
I think I understood it definitely on an intellectual level, and I've been fortunate through the grace of God that I've been a cradle Catholic, and I haven't really had a point where I've strayed significantly from the sacraments. But I think our upbringing was very much our faith, and the sacraments are an obligation. It's obligatory. And so I wouldn't say I had a lot of positive associations. When we would go to adoration, it was kind of okay, this is something you have to do. You have to sit and be quiet for 30 minutes and talk to Jesus. And it was when I got older and I was in college, actually, that I started going to adoration just on my own, and mass also on my own. I would go to adoration because my sister and I were sharing a car, and she had this class that was crazy at the crack of dawn. And so I either could nap in some empty classroom, or I could go to the Perpetual Adoration Chapel down the street. And so I started going to the Perpetual Adoration Chapel down the street. And the way I had been raised to do adoration was you need to be extremely active. You need to be praying the rosary the whole time or reading a religious book. But I kind of had this breakthrough, I am exhausted. I am barely here. But just to be there, and if I just sat there for 60 minutes in the presence of Jesus, that was enough, or that was enough to bring grace. And I definitely started to feel that, like, it felt like sunbathing. Like if I spent just a little bit of time that I spent would have an impact on me throughout the week and throughout my life. And so the sacraments became something that not was just obligatory for me, but something that I actively desired and brought a significant amount of joy, and something that I sought out beyond just, going to Sunday Mass because you have to. I think also I started to kind of take the faith more on as my own as I got older, because I started doing a lot of reading. C.S. Lewis and Peter Kreeft are two of my favorite authors. And I had a firm knowledge of the faith from I knew the catechism, but understanding why we believed what we believed, and reading those people really, really helped me understand why we believed, and so grasp it even firmer.
Yeah, phenomenal. Yeah. Melanie Lyon is with us, Executive Director of Voices for Life. Going to get into that good work as we go into the program today, voicesforlife.com. You can check them out there. But yeah, look, this show, The Simple Truth, what is the simple truth? At the very most essential foundational level, we're talking about God's love for us, and that we are to humbly receive it and then to love him back, right? Everything flows from that. That is the sacramental life. That is his Catholic Church that he died to give us. Everything flows from there. And then out of that, love of God, love of neighbor. And in this time where we've got this ongoing daily mass murder of our preborn, we got to be reaching out in love of neighbor. We're going to get to more. Stay tuned.
Tired of your phone bill supporting who knows what? Switch to iCatholic Mobile, the only 5G provider that won't leave you guessing where your money's going. With iCatholic Mobile, every call, text, and even that group chat you can't escape helps support the Station of the Cross. So why not switch to a network that's good for your soul and your wallet? Visit iCatholicMobile.com today and make your mobile service work for a higher purpose.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today on this Testimony Tuesday, Melanie Lyon, Executive Director of Voices for Life, voicesforlife.com. Melanie sharing some of her story with us today. And I think we left off. So you were in you're still quite young, I think. I don't know how old you are, but you still seem like you're quite young. But you started a job as a young person pretty early on here, this call to get involved more in pro-life activities. So you take a job with your local Right to Life group. How long were you there? What was that experience like? What did you learn through that time?
I was there for about close to 4 years. I graduated with my bachelor's in English from Indiana University, and then I took the job at Right to Life right after. And initially when I took the position, I was dating my now husband at the time, and he still had a few years of school to finish up. And so when I took the position, I said, okay, God, I will do this work for 2-3 years, as long as it takes for Owen to graduate. And then once he does and we get married, then I'll do something that I actually want to do. So, and then a couple weeks into it, it hit me that this was not just a 3-year commitment. This was a secondary vocation for me. This was going to be a lifelong calling. And I think the main reason that happened is because there was an abortion clinic that opened up in South Bend. So we had been without an abortion facility for about 2 to 3 years after Dr. Klopfer's facility was shut down by the Indiana Department of Health. So we had kind of had a breather, and the Right to Life group was focused more on direct services initiatives for women. But we had a clinic open up. They opened out without a state license because a liberal judge let them open. So they were open without oversight by the state, essentially. And I remember the first day that they opened, I had trained as a sidewalk counselor, but I'd really it just been like a classroom training. I hadn't been out at all. And we had been doing some preliminary training to get people ready so that we could cover the facility. And my boss called me and was like, can you go out there? They're open. They're doing abortions for the first day. Can you go out there? And I was terrified because I had done a lot of pro-life activism, a lot of pro-life apologetics, but I had never done sidewalk counseling where you literally feel like you have these children's lives in your hands. Like it's dependent on, it feels at least dependent on what you say could change the outcome of whether he or she lives or dies. But I said yes, and I was still terrified, but I went out to the facility, and I remember praying the rosary. And that for me is one of the things that sustains me when I'm at an abortion facility, is even just holding a rosary in my hand. It's so comforting. And I began to pray the joyful mysteries of the rosary. And when I got to the Annunciation, I just started weeping, because it is a mystery that it's a joyful mystery. The incarnation of Christ is something as Catholics that we reflect on as something joyful, something beautiful, something welcome. And then while in front of me was the exact opposite, like life coming into this world was being met with frustration and murder and all these horrible things. And so that really broke me in a way that I hadn't been, even from working full time in the movement for a year or so. And so I worked there. I grew the largest sidewalk counseling program in the state, and we covered every single hour that abortion facility was open. At least one of our team members was there, no matter the weather. I remember my feet freezing up several times while I was out there. We were there, and they ended up shutting down after just 2.5 years of being open, even though Indiana has an abortion ban now, but they shut down even before that went into effect. And that's in large part, I think, to the faithfulness of our sidewalk counseling team that just covered that place in prayer whenever they were open. I think I also learned that what was going to sustain me in this movement was working with people on the one-on-one level. So at Right to Life, we had a lot of programs, like we had a bunch of media campaigns, we had a bunch of events that we would do. But the programs that I found that were the most impactful were the grassroots ones. So like sidewalk counseling, where you're having one-on-one conversations with people. And so that definitely came out as what I found was the most effective way of fighting abortion on the grassroots level, was this on the ground outreach. I ended up leaving Right to Life right before the Dobbs decision came out, and then I had the opportunity to found Voices for Life. But I'm really grateful for the experiences that I had there. I was 21 when I started, and so I was very young, but it really helped me in my professional development, but also just secured that this is indeed a secondary vocation for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and there's something about the openness to even discern a calling in an area that you don't really desire. Right. That's a beautiful thing, and not an easy thing. And so this is, I can relate to it. I'm sure, again, a lot of other people that are listening this today that are involved in pro-life work, I'm sure that they can relate. It's not natural that we have to be doing this, that we're called to be doing this. But it's the time that we're living in. Again, the ongoing daily mass murder of our littlest brothers and sisters. We don't choose this. We wish it wasn't happening, of course, but it is. And so again, it's the parable of the Good Samaritan. We've got to face it. We can't just ignore it and try to run away from it. We've got to face it. And then it demands something of us, because authentic love is needed in this area. So what does it mean to engage? What does it mean to love our neighbor in the midst of this? And absolutely engaging right out there as an act of mercy and love on the sidewalks outside of these killing centers. And I think the vision that you've articulated there that had struck you, and it was the same vision that struck me in Rochester, New York some years ago, as I was on the ground there for a few years. And it's, look, can we get the hands and feet of Christ on these sidewalks every single hour they're open? It just seems to me to be a no-brainer that would be what the local mission is. If you have a killing center in your backyard, that would be a great place to start. And so you did that. You were actively doing that. You accepted the call. You said yes, and you went forward. Again, sure, there's a lot of other things you'd prefer to be doing, but you said yes to the call to step in real love and engage. And you continue to do that with Voices for Life. What was it unique in the call from Right to Life, your position there, to then Voices for for Life. Again, was there a sense of, I'm sure there was a sense of sacrifice in it, but maybe in some way tailored more to the uniqueness of your heart and God wanting to work in that with a new sort of apostolic outreach here with Voices for Life? How did that come to be?
One of the main reasons is because of just the shifting culture. So I think the Dobbs League came in like beginning of May. And so the decision wasn't handed down until June, but we knew it was going to happen. And I was leaving Right to Life for various reasons, but I interviewed with several national pro-life organizations, and I discerned maybe taking like a remote position with an organization like Students for Life. But I never felt at peace with any of those interviews. Like I said, my passion was for on the ground activism within my community, within my state. And I had started something really effective through the grace of God in my work at Right to Life. And so I had a sense that my work was unfinished here in Indiana. And so I decided to take a leap of faith. Starting a new organization is scary. But luckily I had some other pro-life champions that came along and formed our board that were willing to support me. But with the Dobbs decision coming down, we knew Indiana would pass a fairly restrictive abortion ban. We have a Republican supermajority, and they're generally pretty pro-life. The pro-life scene was going to change in a way that it more drastically than it probably ever would before. So the programs, the strategies that had been in effect before then, like everything was changing completely. And especially since we were going to probably have a restrictive abortion ban, we needed to focus on what the main focus has always been, is changing hearts and minds and shifting the culture towards life. And so that's what our core at Voices for Life is to engage in this grassroots outreach to radically shift the culture towards the concept that killing a baby in the womb is absolutely unthinkable, regardless of what the law says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we're gonna dive deep into the work as much as we can of Voices for Life. Again, voicesforlife.com. But as we kind of wrap up more of the personal story leading up to it, I would like to ask about one more aspect of your personal story, and that is the vocation to marriage. What was discernment like? I know that's always something we could use a little bit of wisdom on for the young people that might be listening, just in terms of what was your experience like in discerning vocation, and then also not just discerning vocation, but then you find your husband, you two have the call to matrimony, you guys get married, and then discerning, I'm gonna continue to work in this area. I'm gonna then start a new nonprofit organization in this area at the same time being faithful to my vocation. What was that discernment like, and just any wisdom you can share on that?
I am blessed with, I think, the gift of clarity when it comes to difficult life decisions, because in general, the Holy Spirit kind of tells me exactly what to do. So I met my husband at a pro-life, not exactly what to do, it's kind of hyperbolic, but I do usually have clarity. So I met my husband at a pro-life apologetics training at Notre Dame 7 or 8 years ago at this point. And we had a shared love, not just of pro-life apologetics. We had we sat together at lunch, basically, and we talked about, but we also had a shared love of C.S. Lewis that I mentioned, and I also love J.R.R. Tolkien. And I came back from that encounter, and I told my mom, I met my future husband today, and I wasn't completely joking. We saw each other kind of on and off for several years, but I remember when I was in college, I was going to adoration one of those times when I went in the early morning because I was just waiting on my sister, and I remember praying about my vocation, and I hadn't thought about Owen in a really long time because he wasn't someone I saw consistently, but his name just popped into my head and completely out of nowhere. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, we'll see if this goes anywhere. And I ended up seeing him a couple months later, and we exchanged contact information and then started dating. So for advice, I would say prayer is really, really important. Prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament has impacted me more than anything else in my life. But also openness. I wasn't really looking for a relationship when I was in college, and I kind of liked the idea of working for a couple of years before getting married. But I was I was like, okay, I'm just, for this 30-minute period that I was praying, I'm just going to allow myself to be open to whatever God might lay on my heart. And he lay Owen's name. And so we got married 3 years ago, and now we have a son, Roger, named after a great pro-life advocate. Balancing my marriage with my work is difficult, and absolutely the only reason I am able to do this work is because of the support of my husband. He is the most supportive person to me in my life, and that looks like us prioritizing our marriage, so not talking about abortion on the weekends, that sort of thing, but also whenever I need him to be somewhere, he's there helping with events, volunteering, doing maintenance work in our office. He's extremely supportive, and I'm really, really blessed to have him.
Wow. Yeah, what a gift to have Melanie Lyon with us today, sharing some of her story. Executive Director of Voices for Life, voicesforlife.com. We're going to delve into the good work being done there when we get back on the front lines in Indiana. What does that look like? What's unique about Voices for Life? Well, Melanie is going to share that with us when we get back. And certainly very prayerful and open, striving to do God's will, follow the Holy Spirit. So let's hear what the Holy Spirit is stirring in her good work when we get back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Melanie Lyon, Executive Director of Voices for Life, voicesforlife.com. We're going to get back with Melanie in just a moment here. But first, do you know the only Catholic mobile phone company in the U.S. today? It's iCatholic Mobile. If you have cell phone service, why not switch over to iCatholic Mobile? Not only do you get your cell service then from a Catholic source you can feel good about, but also iCatholic Mobile gives a portion of every dollar earned to the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network, which means when you subscribe to iCatholic Mobile, you are helping to fund all the programs on the Station of the Cross, including The Simple Truth. We greatly appreciate you switching to iCatholic Mobile. You can join today, iCatholicMobile.com. That's iCatholicMobile.com. All right, back to Melanie Lyon and Voices for Life, voicesforlife.com. You know, Melanie, you mentioned the first joyful mystery, the Annunciation, the incarnation of our Lord Jesus. And in the last segment, you mentioned it. And, just happened to be sitting with that scripture from Luke chapter 1 right before the show. And so I happened to have it open to that and just taking a look at it here during the break again. And what the angel Gabriel says to Our Lady when he says nothing will be impossible for God. And he's also talking about Elizabeth's conception in this time of John and Mary's response, behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word. Then the angel departed from her. I can't help but just kind of affirm you and your story and your good work and saying how beautiful it is when the Lord gives that good prompting to say yes, to say, here I am, I'm at your service, Lord. May it be done unto me according to your word, and to then live that out. And just beautiful to have you share some of your witness here today. And now we get into some of the fruits of the good work here of Voices for Life, voicesforlife.com. Share with us a little bit more about the organization, what you guys are committed to, what sort of give us a kind of an overview of the different aspects of the type of service you provide.
We were founded in July 2022. We may actually be the first pro-life organization that was founded post-Dobbs, because we got our paperwork filed a couple days after that decision. And our vision is for an abortion-free Indiana. And how we want to accomplish that is by, in our mission statement, empowering Hoosiers throughout Indiana, throughout the whole state, to do the difficult education and enforcement work necessary to completely end abortion in our state. We have a pretty restrictive abortion ban, so for a lot of people, they think, okay, that's kind of it. But no, we have to be on the front lines fighting these grassroots fights, and that's what our organization is committed to. Our three main programs, and right now they're mostly going on in northern Indiana. We also have some volunteers in central Indiana, but our vision is to have this happening throughout the state. But we pro-life sidewalk counseling, which we kind of talked about a little bit. It looks a little bit different here in Indiana right now, but I'll talk about that later. Pro-life door knocking, which is probably our most unique program. And then monitoring and enforcement of the abortion industry that still exists here in Indiana. We have some other events and outreaches, but those are what we found are the most effective ways of really changing the culture on the grassroots level. And so we are 100% committed to pushing those outreaches. So with Sidewalk counseling, so abortion facilities cannot perform abortions in Indiana under our legislation. It can only happen in hospitals or nursing homes. But we do still have 11 Planned Parenthood locations that refer women for abortions. And here in Indiana, we're kind of in a unique position because we have a strict abortion law, but we're surrounded by Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan, all of which are considered abortion haven states. Illinois obviously has been very pro-abortion for a long time, with Michigan and Ohio having pro-abortion ballot measures successful over the past couple of years. So any woman in Indiana is, I believe it's on average an hour and 40 minutes from an abortion facility or Planned Parenthood location. So the Planned Parenthood locations in Indiana, they bring girls in, they give them a pregnancy test, and then they send them to one of their out-of-state clinics with a referral. And so our Sidewalk counseling team, they're on clinics for two reasons. The main one is to reach women who are abortion vulnerable women, so women who may be pregnant, and connect them to local support within their community, a pregnancy resource center. And then secondly, to push all business away for Planned Parenthood. So some people are there for like STD testing, which is a morally neutral service, but we encourage them to take their business elsewhere. Don't support an organization that is the leading killer of unborn children in the United States. And a lot of the people that we encounter there, even if they're not pregnant at the time, they are very likely to be an abortion vulnerable women in the next couple of years, because even if they're there at Planned Parenthood for birth control, that birth control is going to fail and they'll end up with, wanting to pursue an abortion. So our goal is to let them have information about life affirming services before they even go out of state. And we've also had a lot of opportunities to be able to educate on like natural family planning with women who have been surprisingly open. That was something that really surprised me, but girls that are there for birth control and talking with them about living a chaste lifestyle as well. We've luckily the Holy Spirit has allowed us to have some really fruitful encounters. So that's our Sidewalk counseling program. We have the biggest one in the state here in northern Indiana where I am, and then we're working to get every Planned Parenthood completely covered throughout the state of Indiana. Our pro-life door knocking initiative. So we go door to door, both educating people about the injustice of abortion. We focus on the abortion pill because it's over 60% of abortions now. It's really easy to get online illegally, unfortunately. And then also sharing local resources. So we have a conversation with someone, and we ask them what their thoughts are on abortion. We educate them about like fetal development and what abortion does to an unborn child. And then we end every conversation with here's a list of safe places that you could take you or someone you know if they're ever in a crisis situation. And I've been involved with a lot of pro-life programming from both my time at Right to Life, but also other pro-life organizations that I've worked with and volunteered for. This is by far the most effective one when it comes to actually moving the needle. Like the conversations that we're able to have. I had one of our canvassers was able to move someone who identified as a Satanist from a completely pro-abortion position to a partially pro-abortion position. There's still obviously a lot of room for the Holy Spirit to work there. But still someone who has the most radical position possible because Daniel listened to them. He asked them questions. He was kind. He was able to move them significantly and hopefully plant seeds for further conversion. We've hit over 9,000 doors so far, and our goal is to hit every single one in Indiana over the next several years if we can get the people to be able to do it. And then finally, monitoring and enforcement. So we monitor every abortion that happens in the state of Indiana. I've looked through hundreds and hundreds of documents request what are called terminated pregnancy reports, and each report is filled out by a doctor for a particular abortion, and it has information about the age of the baby, the type of abortion, whether there were certain types of complications. It's very difficult to look through them because it's not just a form. Each one represents a baby that was brutally murdered here in Indiana. But we review this data and other sorts of data like 911 calls from Planned Parenthood locations. And when we identify a violation, we work with the Attorney General and the Health Department to investigate these facilities or these doctors with the end goal of having them shut down or the doctor's licenses removed. We're kind of at an impasse right now because the Health Department in Indiana is not very helpful to pro-life causes right now. So they told us earlier this year that they would no longer provide this data just suddenly. And so we are working with the Thomas More Society to sue the Indiana Department of Health to be able to obtain this documentation again. And that case is currently at the appellate level. But before then, we had submitted complaints about over 701 cases of potentially illegal activity and really horrible things like babies born alive from botched abortions that happened 5 times, according to these records in Indiana over the past couple of years, women who have died from the abortion pill, abortions on minors going unreported, abortions happening at unlicensed facilities, really just illegal abortions happening. It comes as no surprise that an industry that profits off of taking innocent human life doesn't care if like the facility is clean or whether they're performing a legal abortion or not. And that's definitely what our enforcement work has brought out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. This is incredible. Yeah. Well done. And I guess just following up on the monitoring and enforcement piece, that's fascinating. And so this really depends on what each state, in this case Indiana, what their laws are in terms of what needs to be reported, I guess, right? So what are the laws in Indiana? That's what it sounds like the abortion folks are playing games with at this point. But does it seem like lawmakers are on top of that they've mandated basically reporting laws, which is why you can get that information? That would not be the case necessarily in every state, but it's due to state law. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's no national abortion requirement, and it does vary by state. This has been practice for Indiana since the 1970s. So they're called terminated pregnancy reports, or TPRs. They have been public record since the 1970s. So basically since abortion has been legal in Indiana. And their purpose is so the public can evaluate provider compliance with abortion law. Because the way the Indiana abortion code is set up, the Attorney General, if he were to look at a document, he cannot investigate unless there's an outside consumer complaint. And so that has to come from a public organization or just an individual. And this data has been the evidence in a lot of cases that has led to complaints being filed and investigations happening. So Ulrich Klopfer, I mentioned before, he lost his license in 2015 for failing to properly report an abortion that happened on a minor. And under Indiana law, you have to report a girl who comes in for an abortion that's underage within 3 days to DCS, because it's likely she's in a situation of abuse, and DCS needs to be able to address that right away. He did not follow that guideline. And so his license was stripped in 2015 or 2016. So there's precedent for this data being public, and for it being effective in enforcing the law. But unfortunately, the Indiana Department of Health is not invested in enforcing the law against abortionists, which is, really, really sad.
Mm-hmm. And is that, I guess because Indiana is such a pro-life state, which I was very happy to learn. Do they have somebody in there at the head of that department that is not on board with pro-life, and basically they're trying to twist some things? I mean, what is your read on it? Why is there an obstacle at this point?
From talking to state officials, I think it's because a lot of the people within the agency have been there for a really long time. They're left over from a more liberal gubernatorial administration. We've had Republican governors for, I think, the past 3 or 4 in sessions. But a lot of these people have been here for a really long time. Dr. Lindsay Weaver is the head of the Indiana Health Department, and she has not been cooperative in even when they would present us with the data. They weren't helpful. They would send it to us in the most unorganized way possible. They would dismiss complaints saying, oh, it's just a computer glitch that is showing that this abortion was not reported to DCS. So this has kind of been something that I think that's been escalating for a while. And they're taking the opportunity of our abortion ban going into effect and using that as an excuse to not present this data anymore to the public.
Mm-hmm. Well, so glad that you're on top of it. VoicesForLife.com. We're going to be back with one more segment with Melanie Lyon, Executive Director of Voices for Life and founder of Voices for Life. Again, VoicesForLife.com. So I've got a couple of questions on the sidewalk counseling piece, the door knocking piece, which really excites me. And so we'll come back with more with Melanie in these areas and more. But I do want to encourage you as we head into the break to really spend some time in prayerful discernment. Again, we've got to face the reality of what's before us. What are we called to? Look at what Melanie was able to discern and step into this call of the Lord. Look, he's calling all of us in some way. It's no coincidence that in Matthew 25, right before we get the part about do whatever you do to the least of these, which you do unto me, that whole thing, we get the parable of the talents. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Melanie Lyon, Executive Director of Voices for Life, VoicesForLife.com. Going to get right back to Melanie in a moment, but I do want to remind folks, especially if you're anywhere near the Boston, Massachusetts area, we've got the next National Men's March to Abolish Abortion and Rally for Personhood coming up this weekend, Saturday, November 16th. Join us in Boston, 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. We've got the prayer gathering outside of the Planned Parenthood Abortion Killing Center. We've got the 3-mile march. We've got the rally for personhood with national and local pro-life speakers. We've got all kinds of great people joining us there. Pam Stenzel, Walter and Lori Hoy. We've got Monica Miller is coming out to join us for the first time. We got a bunch of great folks on the local level. CJ Doyle is going to be with us for the first time, and some local priests going to be out there leading prayer with us, and going to be a wonderful event. All the information at themensmarch.com, themensmarch.com. If you can come and be with us there, that would be a great blessing. And we are going to have that prayer opportunity the night before as well, which is a Eucharistic Holy Hour, confessions available, and the Holy Mass the night before to get us spiritually ready to go for Saturday, the big event outside there in Boston, Massachusetts. So hope you can join us. Again, themensmarch.com, themensmarch.com. All right, Melanie, Voices for Life, VoicesForLife.com. So before we get into a little bit more on the sidewalk counseling and the door knocking aspect of the organization and the good work that you're doing, a big picture on the organization, it seems like, so it says here about Voices for Life on the website, exists to fight abortion on the front lines in Indiana, goes on to say that whether it be on the sidewalks, the streets, the churches, the State House, we stand in the trenches, engaging the Hoosier pro-life community to do the challenging educational and enforcement work necessary to end abortion. So it sounds like your lane, what you are committed to, is really, yes, this on-the-ground work that needs to be done, knocking on doors, encountering people out there on the sidewalk in front of the Planned Parenthoods, and being able to really reach people one by one, to really do that education in such an intimate level, one person by one person, and to really put the work on and getting that done. That's incredible. As far as kind of like the legal piece, the political piece, that's not really part of your lane, part of Voices for Life, or do you sometimes do a little bit of that as well? How do you see that, or are you really just focused on, no, we've got to stay in our lane, we got to stay focused on the ground, changing hearts and minds?
We're a 501c3, so we don't focus on politics at all. Sometimes when there are issues with the law that are high priority, we, like it says in our mission statement, sometimes the frontline fight is in the State House. And so, for example, when our abortion ban was being passed, we brought 2 buses of people down to Indianapolis for like a big rally to be able to encourage the legislature to pass the abortion ban. And sometimes the legal, there's a carryover between legal stuff, like we never would have anticipated having to litigate any of these cases, but the enforcement piece is so high priority within ending abortion in Indiana that we determined that it is within our overall strategy to be able to pursue litigation on that topic. And I think also the enforcement piece, it falls within that larger umbrella of changing hearts and minds, because the information that we obtain from these TPRs and submitting complaints is really effective in both mobilizing pro-life people to take action and moving the needle on pro-choice people. So one piece of our enforcement strategy is when we identify a significant violation, we work with friendly media outlets to get as much negative press into whatever that violation is. So say a baby born alive that happened at Sidney and Lois Eskenazi Hospital in Indianapolis, get as much negative publicity there as possible to educate the public that this is happening, and hopefully get people like donors to pull money from the facility, or just make people think twice about a possible pro-choice stance. So yeah, the legal piece is not something we'll probably do consistently, but because the enforcement piece is just so high priority, we are pursuing the litigation against the Indiana Department of Health for the TPR issue.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So the sidewalk counseling continues there, even though the abortion law in Indiana is, what I'm reading here, abortion is illegal. It says legal only in cases involving fatal fetal abnormalities to preserve the life and physical health of the mother, in cases of rape or incest up to 10 weeks of pregnancy. So still, you've got these what are so-called exceptions, which, by the way, I mentioned Pam Stenzel. Like, she's my friend, right? Pam, she is a living embodiment of, she's a so-called exception, right? She was conceived in rape, which is a tragic thing, but at the same time, like, this is a person, right? So you stand there even on behalf of, I would say, I guess, the so-called exceptions, right? On the sidewalk, you are going to see pregnant moms coming in and out at times for abortions for these so-called exceptions. And so you're there for them. You got hands and feet on the ground there for them, but also to educate no matter why people are going in and out, including the workers, I would presume. You stand for all of them. And so that's beautiful to continue that, to keep that going, even when a lot of people would maybe say, the law is such that we don't really need to be out here anymore. No, you stand your ground. You continue to say, no, there's a whole lot of people hurting. There's still great need here. We're going to stand here and help people and serve people and educate people. That's awesome. And then the door knocking in tandem, because now the fight has changed, where the vast majority, and especially in the state of Indiana, it's going to be abortion pill via mail in Indiana. And this probably would not even be legal in the state to have it mailed in. And yet that's still going on. I don't really know exactly what the state law is on that. But certainly this is taking place. And so you're there going, knocking door to door, letting people still know the facts, educating people and changing hearts and minds. And look, when we do this from the ground up, this is what's going to move the needle in a very significant way. We've got to get people who understand this to be able to go out and engage people and share what we know. And you're doing it. So anything else you want to share on it? I'm just super impressed with what you're doing. Yeah,
it is really effective work, but it's really slow and it's really difficult. I was talking to a friend of mine who's also a pro-life leader in Indiana, and just about our goals to have every Planned Parenthood covered and door knocking going on in every county in Indiana. And he said, Melanie, you're never going to find enough people to be able to do that, because even the majority of pro-life people are not willing to do this sort of work. And I told him, I don't need 100% of pro-life people. I don't even need 50 or 25%. All we need is, maybe 5 to 10% of pro-life people in Indiana. If 5 to 10 of pro-life people in Indiana were doing this work, then we would be able to hit every door and staff every Planned Parenthood. Because our team right now, we've got about 150 volunteers, and the amount of stuff that we're able to cover with just that relatively small team is huge. So I think of one of our door-to-door canvassers, Jill is her name. She's a teacher at a local classical Catholic school. She after work on Mondays, she goes to Planned Parenthood and Sidewalk cancels for an hour. And on Saturdays, when she has off, she goes door knocking for 2 hours. And she's able to reach just hundreds of doors and hundreds of people on her own doing that work. So no, this work isn't easy. It's slow. It's hard to go door to door. It's a lot more difficult than just putting up a billboard. But it does have an impact. There's something about going to people's homes that is just really, really impactful. So I've done outreach at college campuses and high schools, but going to people's homes where they have the control, where, they can shut the door, end the conversation, has a huge impact. And it just shows them how much you care. You care enough to come to their door and talk to you about this issue. And it just opens the door to really fruitful encounters that the Holy Spirit leads us to have.
Outstanding. Yeah, Melanie Lyon, Voices for Life, voicesforlife.com. Yeah, we'd love to have you back sometime and maybe share some of the best practices on that door-to-door work that you do. It'd be great to dive in even deeper and find out exactly what that looks like. But yeah, thank you so much, Melanie, for being with us today and for sharing some of your story and the good work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Jim, for all you guys do too.
Absolutely, yes. Voicesforlife.com, voicesforlife.com. Check out the website. Just incredible. This model ought to be one that's taken up in every state. God bless you all.